Welcome to Playlist 4, Deep Learning and Neural Networks. We've mastered the essentials of machine learning. Now, it's time to dive deeper into the models that are truly powering the modern AI revolution. So, what exactly is a neural network, and how is it inspired by the most complex machine we know, the human brain? The entire concept of a neural network isn't something we invented from scratch. It's an idea borrowed from biology. Our brains are packed with billions of highly interconnected cells called neurons. Each neuron receives signals from others, processes them in its cell body, and then decides whether to fire and pass that signal along. The connections between these neurons, called synapses, can become stronger or weaker over time. This constant adjustment is, in essence, how we learn new things. Artificial neural networks attempt to mimic this amazing biological process using mathematics and code. We create a highly simplified model called an artificial neuron, sometimes referred to as a perceptron. It's designed to take in several numerical inputs, just like dendrites receive electrochemical signals. Each of these inputs is then multiplied by a weight, which represents the strength or importance of that connection, analogous to the strength of a biological synapse. A strong weight amplifies the signal, while a weak one diminishes it. So what happens inside this artificial neuron? It's actually just two very simple mathematical operations. First, it computes a weighted sum by taking every input, multiplying it by its corresponding weight, and then adding all of those results together. After that, it adds one more special value called a bias. You can think of the bias as a tunable offset that makes it either easier or harder for the neuron to fire. The final result of these two steps is a single number that represents the total aggregated strength of the incoming signals. Now, does the neuron fire? That decision is made by a critical component called the activation function. This is the final step inside the neuron. It takes that single number, the weighted sum plus the bias, and uses a mathematical function to squash it into a final, standardized output. Simple activation functions might act like an on-off switch, outputting a 1 if the input is high and a 0 if it's low. This step is what allows the network as a whole to learn incredibly complex, nonlinear patterns that simpler models like linear regression could never hope to capture. Of course, a single artificial neuron on its own is quite limited. The real, world-changing power emerges when we connect and stack them together into a network with multiple layers. A typical neural network has an input layer that receives our raw data, one or more hidden layers where all the complex intermediate computations happen, and finally, an output layer that produces the final prediction. The intricate web of connections between these layers is what allows the network to learn hierarchical patterns and solve incredibly difficult problems. And that is the core idea. Neural networks, directly inspired by the brain's structure, are incredibly powerful models built from these simple, interconnected computational units. They learn by systematically adjusting the weights of these connections to recognize fantastically complex patterns in data. You now have a solid understanding of the fundamental concept that underpins almost all of modern AI, from image recognition to language translation. In our next lesson, we will build on this by exploring the very first artificial neuron in detail, the perceptron. I hope you'll join me.